Well, first of all, what is SMI? It's an Excel-based reporting tool for Sage 100 ERP. It also has the ability to connect to other data sources as well. We'll talk a little bit about that here at the beginning. A couple different ways to get into it. You can have the program loaded right on your programs directory. And you'll see right here in this area here, there are a couple different pieces. So this tool, is the primary tool. It's sort of a recommended solution for replacing your FRX, but it also does reports on operational areas, as we're going to see here in a moment. These are the different kind of components that's here. You see there's a report manager. This is the primary portal to author and run reports. Sage is going to give you a free license for this report manager. You can, of course, buy additional licenses. So that gives you the ability to run predefined reports, to customize reports, and you can design some new reports with existing data containers. And it's going to be the primary focus of today's presentation. It's something you all have access to at this point. So try to give you a view of what your capabilities might be. There's also a report viewer you can see there. That is to view reports but not edit them. There's a security manager component, which is where you can define what users can access what reports in the system. And there's a license manager. So one way you could launch it is just by going through here. The way I like to launch it is to launch it right from my Sage 100 desktop. You can see I've added a shortcut here to my shortcut bar, and that's what I'm going to do to go ahead and launch the program here. This is the login screen. This just kind of verifies what company's database you're accessing and your masked login credentials. Okay. And you'll see this has kind of a Windows-like feel with some folders on the left and some information on the right. If we open up one of these, folders here, I'll open up a different one. I'll find one that's got some. Okay, here's one that's got some different colored icons. You notice there's some icons with green and some with blue. The blue colored icons are what's called standard reports, and the ones with green are called union reports. A union report is simply a report that is made up of more than one standard report. Okay, so the first report, we're going to run a lot of reports today. First one we're going to do is we're going to run this customer sales report. We're going to hit the green button here, and it's going to start loading our report. And then this is demo data we're using. So this is from the ABC Demo Company, if any of you are familiar with MAS. And that data is dated May of 2010. And then we'll say OK here. You notice that it's running an SQL query, and it also gives us some information down here about the fact that this report is running. Okay, and here's the first look at the first report. There's lots of detail, different levels of detail here. So if you're shrinking up one of these buttons, it's just a way of kind of grouping that data. If we change some of these parameters up above here, we want to see how the data changes. Maybe we want to look at just Jim. Again, it will filter the data like so. And we'll go ahead and close that report. Now we're going to show you a financial report. And again, we have to put in our fiscal year information. And we'll run the report. Now these are predefined financial reports, so some of them, not all of them, but some of them have to be kind of mapped to your general ledger so that it knows kind of what the reporting groups are. We'll see that in a second once it comes up. Okay, so a lot of instructions here. You can go through these at a later time. I'm going to stick to the knitting here since we're short on time for today's presentation. And I'm just going to go ahead and map these in here. Once you map these, you will be able to save these. We'll see how to save reports in a later step. Okay. And I'm going to come over here and just run an income statement, I think. And it's going out to mass, and it's pulling in all the raw data. Okay, it looks like it's almost done. There we are. And it tells us it's done. Now, one of the things that's real common in the Sage Mass Intelligence pre-built reports is you'll see different detail groups, like up here in the upper left. So you could just go to any one of these categories here, like revenue, and expand it and get the sort of expanded detail there. Or you could just click on the different group and see sort of the details in that fashion. Now, most of the reports will default to either the current period or the period you select when you're running the report. So I'm going to show you how to change periods. I'm going to go over here to our add-ins and change period button. Notice it says we're at period 12. That's because we ran this for the fiscal year of 2010, so it gave us all of it. If we wanted to change that to a different period, I'll change it to period 1 just so you can kind of see what happens. Notice it wipes out all the data there. So another implication of that is if I change this to period 5, and I go to a line here with some activity on it, and I do a drill down now to see what the details are that rolled up to that number, it's automatically going to give me the drill down for the period that it thinks I'm in. And this is one of the big things that standard math can't do for you. You can't drill down from a financial statement into the details of what makes up a particular number. So here it is. And you can even drop this into a traditional Excel spreadsheet and then manipulate it however you like, just by clicking that data to Excel button there. Okay, so if I were to change it back to, say, period 12 and do a drill down, I would be drilling down on period 12. Okay, enough of that one. All right, let's see what we've got coming up next here. All right, we're going to take a look at the trend analysis report, and we're going to see a couple different things about this one. Okay, so the way this one works is you actually have to tell it, you know, what account number you're going to be zeroing in on here. I'm going to pick one that I know has some good activity for us to look at. Okay, there we go. Now, what's interesting about this one is this one has a drill down in it also. Notice the drill down button. This was called a dynamic drill down. So with this one, it lets you drill down based on whatever the cell that you're located on is. So if I hit the drill down here, it's automatically going to load period 3 data for me. And that's the difference between a dynamic drill down and one where you have to kind of change the periods to do that. You can also drill down on these prior years. Coming up next, we have another style report. This is kind of one of my favorites that they have in here. And it's called the Dashboard Analysis Report. Okay, here we go. And by the way, you notice that some of these reports take a few minutes to generate. I'm being told that the new engine for this that's coming out with the 2013 release is faster. Okay, so I'll zoom that up so you can kind of see it. This one here obviously is a lot more colorful, more visual looking. There's also two different style drill downs in here, are different than what we've seen so far. If we highlight a customer, and we drill down on this one, we have kind of a combination one. So in this case, we're going to select by customer because it's the customer we're drilling down on. And we're going to say execute to see what makes up the figures for this customer. And in this case, it turns out to be one transaction. And we can also drill down on items. So if we go over here and say drill down, this time we'll do it by the item. We'll be able to see what makes up the totals for that. So far you can see there's lots of drill downs capabilities with the product. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the report designer. So the report designer, lets you generate financials from predefined lists. You can edit existing or generate new layouts using a drag and drop functionality. Those of you financial types, that's the part that you're going to be most excited for, and is probably the thing that will help you replace your FRX reports. It does require Excel 2007 or higher, and you can use these templates that we have in here as the basis for your own reports. So we're going to see how to copy, move, and edit these reports. All right, so we're going to go into Designer now, and we're going to run Financial Reports Designer. Okay, now for this one here, we're going to go BI Tools, and we're going to tell it to go ahead and launch. And we're going to tell it to go ahead and load a layout. And you can see there's several different choices in here. And we're just going to go ahead and pick a, I don't know, an income statement and hit generate and see what we get. Okay, now this one has 3 detail groups. Let's see here. We go to detail group 3. This is the one with the most expanded information. And we're going to go ahead and do a drill down right here. This is that same account. Notice it's going to give me for period 12 here. Oh, period 12 apparently didn't have any data. Well, let's just change our period then. We'll go back to period 5, and we will drill down. Okay, there we got some demo data. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so that's some of the basics. Now we're going to take it up a notch. And we're going to show you how to maybe, create some of your own reports and customize some of these existing templates. So I'm going to create a new user folder here, and I'm going to just call this, for today's purposes, I'm going to pretend I'm Bob. I'm going to make Bob's reports. And we've got a folder there. And the concept is, when you're looking at these standard reports, let's see here, if I open up one, notice it tells me you have to make a copy of this report to be able to edit it. So what I'm going to do is just go over here and say copy and paste. Now there it is. And if I click on this, now I see that it's lighted up some of the fields that I didn't have access to before. And I could just change this to say, I can change the name in here however I want it. Tell it it's Bob's Customer Sales. And I got a description here that I can modify. And the thing that makes these reports unique is this report ID here. So every report has a report ID. They may or may not have the same name, but the report ID is unique. If we look through the different tabs here, I have access to modify all this as well. And I can see the columns that are in here. I can see if there's any data filters, any parameters that have been put in, as well as any sorting and other filters. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this report, and we are going to then modify it and save it back to our template here, and then so that it'll save our changes. Okay, so this is the same one we looked at earlier. And if we click into the worksheet itself, we get a pivot table option here. And what I wanted to show you here is take a look at this field list. So this is some of the fields that this report kind of has set up with it behind the scenes. And I want to add a couple fields here that the report didn't come with already. So I'm going to go with invoice number and invoice date. And I'm just going to say close. It's now added my fields here. Now let's say I want to save this for my use. I don't really like the Sage coloring or the Sage logos. Let's get rid of those. This one here that says Sage is actually a hyperlink. So I'm going to cut that out of there. And I'm going to go ahead and put my own logo in here. And here's a logo we've got for ABC Company. And if I want to update the formatting, I can do that as well. I'll just go with a white with a, I don't know, we'll go with a blue background here. Sometimes these don't all highlight together like it does when it's in a typical standard Excel spreadsheet. So there we go. So far, so good. Now what we want to do is we want to save these changes that we just made so that we can, have this be like this the next time we come back in. So I'm going to go ahead and just minimize my report. You don't use the Save button here. You minimize the report. You go back to Report Manager, and you right-click and you say Create and Link the Template. And then you pick the workbook that you have open in Excel, and you say OK, and there it goes. That's just an Excel version issue. OK, tells us it was successful, so if we were to rerun that report, we'll see it come up with all our saved changes. And sure enough, there it is. OK. All right, so that's saving a report and linking it to a template after you've made some changes. Now let's talk about reporting trees. For those of you who come from the FRX world, the concept of reporting trees will be familiar to you. Let's see, we're going to move a report up to Bob's again. And we're going to do the financial reports designer on this one. And I'm just going to call it Bob's financial report designer. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and run this. Okay, we'll go ahead and launch it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at it sort of before we do anything, and then we're going to look at it once we add our tree. So let's see here. We're going to do, I think it's the income statement versus budget. Actual versus budget, excuse me. So this is the same report we started out with, but I want to run it again so you point out one thing about it that's going to change. Notice how all our activities on one tab here. We've got the Notes tab, and we've got one tab with all of our information in our detail groups, just like we originally did. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a reporting tree to this. So if we go into the reporting trees, we see that I've got a couple set up in here. We're going to take a look at the one called location. So this is kind of an interesting piece here. So what I've done here is we've got the following locations. We've got a corporate office, that's location 04 in our geo segmentation. 01's our east, 02's our west, 3's our central, and 00's a no location. And here's kind of our tree over here. And you can kind of see the accounts that it's pulling in down here if we change these. It changes those values down below. So we can kind of see the detail of what that represents. But the real work of this thing is up here. What this does here, this is kind of a drag and drop type of functionality. If we wanted to say that the central was under the corporate office, we could drag it there like that. We could put everything into the corporate office. If we want to have no location be out on its own, we can do that. If we want to drag anything out where we want. So these are just kind of like reporting relationships. So in this scenario, we're saying that the east and west roll up to the corporate office, and that these two entities, the no location and the central, do not. So that's kind of where we're going to go with that. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And we're going to come back over here to a quick edit. And we're going to go ahead and we have a spot here to select our reporting tree. And we're going to go ahead and say select. And we're going to pick our location and say OK. And then we're going to say generate layout. And we're going to tell it which of these reporting units we want. I can check them all. And we're going to let this thing run. You can see it's progressing through the different reporting entities as it goes, adding tabs of data. And I think it's on its last one. Okay, and there we are. Now let's take a look at the results here. So we said that Central was on its own. So if we go to Detail Group 3 for that, sure enough, we don't see any accounts here rolling up into this that are anything other than 03. If we go, however, look at the corporate one, we said that it had the corporate, the West, and the East. If we go to look at its details, we'll see that all those entities are now rolling up in here. We can see there's 04s, 02s, and 01s. Accounts ending in those segments for the locations are all there. And we have a different tab for each one of our reporting units, which will give us, their information accordingly. So I just took one report, basically, added a reporting tree, and was able to, expand that out into quite a bit of different reporting. Now let's take a look at the what-if analyzer. And let's see, I'm going to go over here to the corporate. If I click on something here and I go to the what-if analyzer, you get this little box that pops up, and you can see there's some different elements from the financial statements, revenue, cost of goods sold, etc. And I'm just going to use period 1. So as I drag this little bar here up and down, you'll notice the revenue figures will go up and down. If I scroll it all the way up, I can see, what things would look like with that. So if I made my revenue go up and my cost and expenses go down, we'd see what affected our bottom line. So this is, kind of an aggregate way of kind of doing some scenario planning, if you will. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and save this back to my template. Let's say I like the way that reporting tree was working out for me. And I'm just going to come back here and, again, create and link my template and say OK. And it will save it back there for me. Okay, now we're going to talk about the report designer coming up. Now, for those of you who had FRX, this is absolutely the thing you're going to probably like the most about this demonstration. And this is a pretty cool thing, I think. So what this is an alternative way for you to build financial reports directly within Excel. And this requires both the report manager and the report designer components. Okay, so that is the report designer add-in. We're going to take this one down here, and similar to what we've been doing, we're going to copy it and move it up to Bob's folder. Oh, we have some other ones out there somewhere. I'm going to have to give it a 3. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this, I'm going to change this name here to be something reflective of what we're going to make with it. Bob's condensed balance sheet. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run it and see what we get here. It's not going to look like much at first. See if I can get my one-up analyzer to close. My go-to assist is blocking it. There we go. All right, so this is a blank Excel workbook run from that financial report designer inside the system. And what I want to show you here, I can probably pull this out so you can see it a little better. There are, this pane here kind of shows you some different ways of getting information into the sheet. This is the list, sort of the list tab, and it will allow us to drag things like accounts over to there. We have a formulas area where we can do the same with those, and we can even use our reporting trees in here. So what I'm going to do is just show you a couple things in here. And I'm going to just drag the accounts over here to Excel. And it just dragged all my accounts over. You can see it's got the name, the description, account groups, types, all that good stuff. And then the next thing I'm going to do is drag a formula over here. And I'm just going to grab the actual year-to-date, and I'm just going to put that right here. I'm going to format that column to be numeric. And then what we have here is a formula. So I'm going to show you the formula editor here. So what this is doing is it's telling us that to bring in the GL actual year-to-date, it wants a link to the general ledger. It wants to know the year, the period. It can optionally need to know the company and account category code. But these first three are the critical ones right here. And there's a couple different ways I can pull the data in. I can come in here and just type the account number if I want to. And say OK, and it will return my result. I could optionally do it a little more cleverly. I could say, well, my account number is in column M. It's an M5. So I could tell it I want to see M5 here. Now, the interesting part about that is that makes it like an Excel formula. Now, if I look at that formula and I want to make it a sort of a relative or an absolute, I could say, if I put a $sign in front of M, what that does, for those of you who don't know, is that says that it's always going to look in column M, but 5 will be relative. What does that do for me? If I take this formula now and I drag it down, it will always look in column M, but it will change the row based on the row that it's dragged down to. So if I drag this down here like so, I now get the data for all these other accounts just by filling that down. Okay. Now, another thing you can do here is this. It's referring to the fiscal period here. So if I change that to a 3, notice my number changes. If I filled that down, I'd get the period 3 numbers here. Another clever way to do this is to put in somewhere in the header. It doesn't even have to be on the same tab. You could have a place to store the period. Then what you could do is you could come over here and you could tell it that the period here refers to a cell. And I'm going to tell it it's always getting it from N and always getting it from 2. Okay, so I've still got my value here. and then I can drag this down, and then what I can do here, if I want financials that sort of change, by me changing the periods, I could say period 4 and get different data that way. Okay, so that's some of the things you can do with Excel along those lines. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to build Bob's condensed balance sheet. That was all just to kind of show you some of the functionality of the drag and drop, how some of the formulas work, and how you can use cell references to change some things. There's a whole lot more you could do, but for now we're just going to get busy with our balance sheet here, our balance sheet demonstration. So bear with me, I have to kind of type some stuff up here, and I'm going to put it in all caps, but in reality this gives you total control over all the formatting. Okay. Okay, so we got our basic format here of what we want. Now we need to get some data in here. So what we're going to do, because this is a balance sheet, is we want the closing balance. So here's our closing balance formula. We're just going to drag that guy right over here. And I think I'm just going to put him in probably E here, and let's widen this up. And I'm going to go ahead and format column E to be commas. And so there's my formula. Now what I'm going to do is copy my formula down to the other places I need it. And we'll paste it in there. And the problem is, of course, it doesn't know what the accounts are. Notice it brought in our fiscal year and our period automatically. It knows the fiscal year and period because that's what we gave it when we ran it. So what we're going to do now is just show you how we might get these numbers in here. So what I'm going to do temporarily is I'm going to use B to be the place where I tell column E what needs to roll up here. So this is kind of fun. We're going to do 100, main account 100 plus 101. We're going to say that equals our cash. And then what we're going to do is, so that's a plus, and we'll put in here, we'll tell it we want that to use B8. Okay, and then this one, now notice this one I did when I added them, I did 2, so you can do ranges, you can add them in any combination that you want. So you really have total control here. And it's actually better to paste those after I have my cell references. Okay, so now we're just going to put in a few more that we need to finish up here. So the property, plant, and equipment, we're going to say that's 150 to 179. Our other assets, 180 to 199. Our current liabilities are account number 200 to 274. And we have some debt at 275 to 299. That's the end of our balance sheet typically, well, except for the equity. 300 to 399. Whoops. And then last but not least, everything that flows through the income statement for the retained earnings. Okay, so there we are. So now we're just going to use the power of Excel here to get some subtotals. My auto sum. There we are. My total liabilities will fill that in as well. My equity here will be that plus these two. And then what I want to do here is some cosmetic formatting. Typical presentation is not to show them as negative, so I'm going to put the negative sign to flip it on a couple of these. And there we are. Now I would, format the areas that had totals, like so. I would probably bold these guys, and we would merge and center these. And then for presentation purposes, we probably wouldn't want to see these normally. So again, format whatever I want, and then I can just hide B here, and now I have a balance sheet ready to go. So you really can condense it to as few line items as you want. You have total control over what accounts roll up to what. You can call it anything you want. You really have a lot of flexibility there. Okay, now there's a lot more you can do with that. That's a pretty quick example of how to do a condensed balance sheet. There is an excellent video out on YouTube that spends, I think, about a whole hour just on this type of functionality with this drag and drop to build financial statements. And a link for that is right here. If you want to go see that, it's on YouTube at http://q_fnhe6k80i. Okay. Sort of the last section we're going to cover is how to build some operational type reports from scratch without using anything that's in the system already. So we're going to go ahead and close this guy, and we won't worry about saving our changes. Okay, back to our report manager. Okay, so we're going to come over here to Bob's, and we're going to hit the plus button, and we're going to tell it we're going to make a new report. And we're going to tell it it's a standard report. And we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it, I don't know, sales by product line. There it is. Now, what this is, we mentioned there was some other sort of data containers. A data container is just sort of the grouping of tables and information that are kind of grouped in a container, if you will, that you can use for reporting. So that's sort of a terminology used by this product. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick one here. There's one in here called customer sales. And if we look at that, and if we expand this out, what you want to do is you want to kind of look at the description here to give you a little idea of, if this is like the type of data you think you might need. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this one. And then you'll get this type of a screen, which shows here's the fields you have to pick from in that particular data container. So I'm going to pick a couple here. I'll do the division, the customer number. And we'll do their name, invoice date. And they're in alphabetical order, so that makes it helpful to find them. And we'll do quantity sold, and what was the extension amount? I think I got them all there. Okay, so now that we're back in here, sales by product line, back on the Properties tab, we have to kind of tell it all the information since it's a report from scratch. So here's our columns that we selected. What I'm going to do here is make sure we have them in the order that we want, because they don't always come in the order, especially since they're alphabetical. So let's double check here. Division, customer number, name. We want that one to move up. So we'll hit the Move Up button. And we want invoice date next. And we'll do the product line next. And the product line description. And then we want the quantity sold. Okay, so now I've told it what order I want the fields. Here's the Filters tab. I'm going to add a filter. You can see there's a lot of fields. One I'm going to filter on is called Invoice Type. And I'm going to pick not equal to. Okay. And when I hit this button right here, what it does is it goes out and it finds what all the invoice types are. So if I knew it, I could have just typed it in, but I'm going to tell it I don't want anything that's an XD. XD is MAS 90's terminology or Sage 100's terminology for a deleted invoice. So in other words, I'm telling it if it's deleted, I don't need to see it in my report. And there it is. Invoice type is not equal to XD. Now for my parameters tab, I want to add a start and end date for my report. So I want to be able to tell it, when it begins and when it ends for the data. And again, you get this little box. And we're going to pick start date here. For those of you who've done Crystal, you'll appreciate the ease with which this is being done. And we're going to go ahead and pick the @ sign this time. And this gives us sort of some pre-built formulas. And again, those of you who used to doing Crystal parameters, this is a lot easier. And we're just going to pick the @date one right here. And say OK. And we're going to add one more, which is going to be the end date. And we'll select date again and say OK. So now we'll have a start and end date to our report. And then we're going to look at the Sort tab. We're going to want to sort this by our customer and then our product line. So we'll come out here and find those fields. And they go in the order that you put them here. So we'll do customer number and product line. And say OK. And there they are. You can move those up and down as needed with the move up and down buttons on the right here. We're not going to have any aggregate filters. And so that's pretty much it. We're ready to go. And then we're going to go ahead and run this report and see what we get. Okay, here's our parameter. It wants to know when. So we'll bring it back down to 2010. Okay. Okay, so what this did is this generated what's called a raw data tab. So you were probably thinking we were going to get some nice report. We're almost there. We've got to do one more thing. going to come over here to the Quick Pivot, Add-ins Quick Pivot, hit Quick Pivot. We're going to get our Quick Pivot wizard here, and we're just going to tell it kind of how we want it laid out. So we're going to go ahead and put our customer's name over here in our row, and we want the product line description there as well. For the data fields over here, we're going to do quantity sold and extension amount. We're going to kind of see what we get there. In this case, we're telling it we're going to put these on a new sheet. Let's say OK, hit close, and here we've got some information coming in. Now we're going to kind of pretty this thing up. Okay. Couple things we might want to do. Is, for example, we could add our logo if we wanted. We could put a title on it. We'd probably want to fix our formatting here. Make it the same as these. And we could even do some other things. If we wanted to go back to our field list, we wanted to add something, we could add the, the invoice date if we wanted, like that. So you see how that would affect it if we added that. I don't know that that looked too great, but that tells you kind of how you can make some changes. So the fields that we picked initially are part of what shows up in that list. So that's one way how easy it is to kind of build a report just from scratch. Now we're going to talk a little bit about report distribution. You can send reports. Certainly you could have, saved this and manually emailed it to somebody or something like that, but there's actually a distribution function in here. And basically the idea is that you set up the instructions once, and then you're able to kind of keep those instructions with the reports. And so you set them up once. So we're going to look at the Manage Instructions. Here we have a group we created called Senior Management. We're just going to take a quick look at it and see how that's set up. So if you want to do email, you can have a list of email people here and a header, so on. If you want to be file published, or if you want to do an FTP, you can do those. I'm just going to leave this here and say OK. And for this particular report, I can select which instructions I want it to use. So in this case, I'm going to tell it, you're going to use Senior Management, and I only want them to get the 4th tab. So they don't have to get everything in the workbook if I don't want to see them. They don't want to see everything. Say OK here, and then I can hit Send Now, for example, and it will go ahead and email that report to whoever's on that list. And I guess I'll check my email real quick to see if it came in yet. No, it's not here yet, but it will. Oh, there it goes. Comes in as a PDF. And there's our report. Okay, that is the end of my presentation.